This morning's reading comes from Matthew chapter 11, verses 27 to 33. Listen to the word of God. Again, they came to Jerusalem. As he was walking in the temple, the chief priests, the scribes, and elders came to him and said, "By what authority are you doing these things? Who gave you authority to do them?" Jesus said to them, "I will ask you one question. Answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Did the baptism of John come from heaven, or was it of human origin? Answer me." They argued with one another. "If we say from heaven," he will say, "why did you not believe him? But shall we say of human origin?" They were afraid of the crowd, for all regarded John as truly a prophet. So they answered Jesus, "We do not know." And Jesus said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things." Here ends the morning reading. Jesus said, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things." How clever of Jesus to answer a question with a question, to respond in kind. You don't know, and I won't tell you by what authority I am doing what I'm doing. Now, Mark is recounting this story towards the end of his narrative. Shortly after these events, Jesus will be taken away, arrested, tried, and crucified. And Jesus knows that his time is at hand. Let's put this in context. Mark's gospel was written 60 to 90 AD, very close to the events in which he's speaking of. It's the first one that was written, not the first in the canon we know, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, but the first one that was actually written down. And it's the shortest. Mark's gospel begins with the baptism of Jesus, not his birth, the baptism of Jesus. And it ends 16 chapters later. Now, Matthew takes 28 chapters to tell the story. Luke takes 24. John takes 21. Mark's book is very short. He dives right in. He says, this is what the story will be. It will be the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. And that's what it is. It's the story of Jesus, his life of ministry placed in the social, economic, and political issues of his time. Now, Jesus has been healing people for quite a while. Mark tells us very early in the first chapter that Jesus was preaching at the synagogue in Capernaum, and there was a man with an unclean spirit, and Jesus healed him. So Jesus' fame is spreading. His popularity now is putting him in the spotlight. The authorities, both the political and the religious authorities, are very troubled by him. And now we're in chapter 11. So chapter 8, Jesus comes into Jerusalem in triumph on Palm Sunday. And by chapter 16, the women have come to the tomb and seen the stone rolled back. So half the gospel is really the story of the end of Jesus' life, and we're kind of right in the middle of that, chapter 11. So what's going on in this passage? Well, the chief priests are testing Jesus. They are acting not only in behalf of the religious leaders, but also of the Roman occupiers. Now, everybody's afraid of Jesus now and his following. After all, the scribes are supposed to be the authorities in the matter of religion, and they're trying to show that they're in charge, not Jesus. And here he is preaching in the synagogues, teaching in the synagogues, healing people. This is just not what's supposed to be going on. So they challenge him. Who gave you the authority to do these things? And Jesus follows an excellent rabbinical tradition. He answers a question with a question. John's baptism, was it of human origin or from heaven? You tell me. Now, Francis Maloney's wonderful commentary on Mark tells us, and I'm quoting now, the chief priests, scribes, and elders fall into disarray. They are unable to resolve their dilemma once Jesus introduces the possibility that God may be part of John's activity. Maloney goes on to say they dare not say that his baptism, John's baptism, was from heaven. That answer would place them in a bad light, given their lack of interest in John's baptism. But many others did go to him, and now all maintain he was a prophet. So they're in trouble now, and Jesus knows it, and he traps them with his answer when he says, you answer a question for me. Here's my question. What was John's baptism, human or heavenly origin? And they can't really arrest him. There's no reason to arrest him. He's not done anything wrong. He just gets his point across. You don't know? Okay, I won't tell you how I do things. So here's a question for us today. Who are the chief priests in our lives? Where might we face a conflict between earthly authority and heavenly authority? Whose rules do we follow? During wars, some people are conscientious objectors. Their country may tell them they need to go to war and kill people, but their consciences and their understanding of God's authority tells them otherwise. So whose rules are they following? The movie Chariots of Fire tells the story of the runner Eric Liddell, who was a Scottish Christian who won't run in the 1924 Olympic heat that's scheduled on Sunday. Tells his sister, I run for the glory of God, and I will not run on the Sabbath. So it's pretty clear whose rules he's following, by whose authority he does things. Now, this story of Chariots of Fire has a happy ending. They do a little switching around of the schedule, and so he doesn't have to run on Sunday, but he still gets to run. Now, in that story, Eric Liddell is very clear. The commandments say, remember the Sabbath, keep it holy, I'm not running. But sometimes the conflict isn't so clear. For example, some of us are expected to go to work on Sunday. A firefighter or a police officer may have to work on Sunday, or you may work in a retail store and have to be there on Sunday. So maybe we find other ways to keep the Sabbath. Or we may, like Eric Liddell in the movie, swap our schedules around so we can keep the Sabbath day holy actually on the Sabbath. Or perhaps the conflict between heavenly authority and earthly authority is a little more subtle. For many years, slavery was the law of our land. Some people of faith owned slaves. By whose authority? Other people of faith believed the law had to be changed. By whose authority? And sometimes, until we ask ourselves, we don't really know whose rules we're following. When I was growing up, no one shopped on Sundays. Here in New York, the stores were closed. It was really easy to keep the Sabbath. There was nothing else you could do. Now we can shop all the time, day, night. You can't sleep, get up and shop if you want to. So as I was preparing this sermon, I found myself wondering, what if Sundays were a shopping-free day in my house? Would it be a better way to remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy? Jesus reminds the chief priests and us that all authority comes from God. Sometimes earthly authority and heavenly authority are in conflict. Perhaps we need to nurture habits that let us hear what God is saying to us in our lives. So who's in charge of your life?